Democrats and the media are now unloading all their nasty attacks on rising Trump White House star and new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt.
I think she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10.
Picture this. The youngest ever White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, steps into the iconic briefing room, ready to take on the world. At only 27, she's already making history. But just as quickly, she's making waves. And not the calm kind. Her first press conference has sent shockwaves through media circles, sparking heated debates, wild accusations, and yes, even some jaw-dropping insults. But how did she get here, and why is everyone talking about her? Well, buckle up, because we're diving deep into the rise of Karoline Leavitt, her bold moves straight out of the gate, and the critics who are, let's just say, losing their cool.
Karoline Leavitt, she's just 27 years old. But boy, was she giving it to the Trump haters in her first White House briefing.
Karoline Leavitt didn't just stumble into the political spotlight overnight. Born and raised in New Hampshire, she grew up far from the glitz and chaos of Washington, D.C. She wasn't born into privilege or a political dynasty. No, Karoline carved her own path. She attended St. Anselm College, where she studied communications and political science. And if you're wondering whether she was just another college student with big dreams, think again. While her peers were worrying about finals, Karoline was already making moves. She interned at Fox News, gaining an insider's view of the media world, and later stepped into the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence, where she got her first taste of the fast-paced political scene under President Trump's first term.
And Karoline Leavitt isn't just making headlines, she's also rewriting history. At 27, the New Hampshire native has become the youngest White House press secretary ever.
But here's where things get really interesting. After graduating in 2019, Karoline didn't waste any time. She joined the White House press office as an assistant under Kayleigh McEnany, one of Trump's most combative and memorable press secretaries. Imagine being fresh out of college and suddenly helping prepare statements and handling the media circus that surrounded the Trump administration. Talk about a trial by fire. But Karoline thrived. By the time Trump left office, she had already built a reputation as someone sharp, articulate, and fiercely loyal to the administration. Her career didn't stop there. She went on to work as communications director for Representative Elise Stefanik, one of Trump's most vocal allies in Congress. And if that wasn't enough, she even ran for Congress herself in New Hampshire in 2022. Although she didn't win the general election, her campaign turned heads, proving that she wasn't just a behind-the-scenes operator. Karoline Leavitt was a rising star in her own right. So when Trump announced her as his pick for White House press secretary after winning re-election, it wasn't exactly a shock to those who've been paying attention, but it was historic.
A staunch Trump loyalist and unapologetic Gen Z conservative, Leavitt's sharp rhetoric and bold social media presence have already made waves.
Of course, not everyone celebrated her ascent to the podium. The backlash came fast and furious, particularly from liberal media figures and commentators. And the loudest voices? None other than the hosts of The View, who seem to have plenty of opinions about Karoline, and not the kind you'd expect from self-proclaimed champions of women in leadership. Joy Behar didn't hold back, claiming that Karoline had only been chosen because, in her words, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. Ouch. Let's just pause for a second to appreciate how blatantly dismissive that is. Forget her years of experience, her education, or her role in shaping key messaging for Trump's campaigns. Apparently, it all boils down to her appearance.
Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you.
But it didn't stop there. Whoopi Goldberg chimed in with her own critique, claiming that Karoline owed her entire career to what she called wokeness. According to Whoopi, the very policies Karoline now opposes are the reason she even has a seat at the table. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the conservative commentators who came rushing to Karoline's defense. Social media erupted with backlash against The View, with many calling the remarks sexist and hypocritical. How, critics asked, could the same people who preach about empowering women in leadership positions turn around and reduce Karoline to nothing more than her looks?
Without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table.
And here's the thing about Karoline Leavitt. She's not one to back down. Her first press briefing was a masterclass in confidence, composure, and yes, a little bit of attitude. She didn't just stand there reading from notes or dodging tough questions. No, Karoline came prepared to shake things up. One of her boldest moves? Announcing that the White House would be opening up seats in the briefing room to what she called new media voices. That's right, she's making room for podcasters, influencers, and independent journalists who've been largely shut out of the traditional media landscape. It's a move straight out of Trump's playbook, appealing directly to his base while bypassing the so-called legacy media. Beyond her poised demeanor, what truly shocked the press corps was Karoline's decision to call out mainstream media outlets directly. She wasted no time accusing legacy media of losing the trust of everyday Americans due to what she referred to as years of biased reporting and misinformation. "We will call you out when we feel your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House," she declared to a room that had grown noticeably tense. It was a bold move, and one that signaled this administration's intention to confront its critics head-on rather than playing nice. The room might have been packed with seasoned reporters, but in that moment, Karoline made it clear she wasn't intimidated.
in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to Doge. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly...
The strategy wasn't just about rattling the press corps, it was about reshaping the narrative entirely. By prioritizing non-traditional media voices, she's effectively bypassing traditional gatekeepers and speaking directly to Trump's base. Analysts have pointed out that this isn't just a communication strategy, it's a political one. By inviting influencers and independent creators into the fold, Karoline and the administration are tapping into platforms that hold massive sway over younger, tech-savvy voters. It's a gamble, but one that could pay off in spades if it successfully mobilizes a demographic that Republicans have historically struggled to connect with. Whether the mainstream media likes it or not, this approach is rewriting the rules of engagement. The reaction from traditional outlets was predictably frosty. After all, they've held a monopoly on the White House briefing room for decades, and now they're being told to make space for newcomers? You can imagine the grumbling in newsrooms across D.C. But Karoline didn't flinch. She pointed out that millions of Americans, especially younger ones, no longer get their news from traditional outlets. Instead, they're turning to podcasts, blogs, and social media. It's essential to our team that we adapt to this new media landscape, she told reporters. Love her or hate her, you've got to admit, it's a bold move.
We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything.
But the controversies didn't stop with her media reforms. Karoline also made headlines for her statements on gender and the administration's stance against what she described as funding for transgenderism and wokeness. Predictably, these remarks sparked outrage from liberal commentators and advocacy groups who accused her of promoting discrimination. The View's Sunny Hostin even questioned whether the influencers and independent journalists Karoline was inviting to the press room would meet the same standards as traditional reporters. Why are they qualified to sit in the White House briefing room, she asked, implying that the move was lowering the bar for journalism. And then there was the tense exchange with CNN's Caitlin Collins, who grilled Karoline about reports that an Associated Press journalist had been barred from covering an Oval Office meeting. Collins accused the administration of retaliating against reporters who didn't use the White House's preferred terminology for geographical names. Karoline didn't back down, insisting that the administration had every right to decide who gets access and accusing the AP of spreading misinformation. It was a fiery moment that underscored just how combative the relationship between the Trump administration and the press remains.
Well, the president has already taken a very strong stance on this issue this week with the signing of his executive order, a few executive orders in this space.
But here's the twist. While her critics were busy nitpicking her every word, Karoline was quietly racking up wins. The Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, reported saving the federal government billions by cutting waste and fraud. The administration's initiatives to root out inefficiencies and redirect funds to American priorities have been wildly popular with Trump's base. And Karoline has been front and center, defending these policies and calling out what she sees as hypocrisy from the left. If you shut your eyes and listen to what Democrats promised for decades, she said in a recent interview, you'd think you were listening to President Trump and Elon Musk.
That's the only difference between what President Trump is doing and what these Democrats have promised the American people for decades. He's actually following through on the promise to cut federal government waste.
So where does that leave us? On one hand, Karoline Leavitt is clearly a polarizing figure. Her critics see her as a mouthpiece for Trump's most controversial policies, while her supporters view her as a trailblazer who's unafraid to challenge the status quo. What's undeniable is that she's already reshaping the role of White House press secretary in ways that will have lasting implications. By opening the door to new media voices and taking a hardline stance against traditional outlets, she's fundamentally changing how the White House communicates with the public. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on who you ask. As for her critics, they might want to think twice before underestimating Karoline Leavitt. If her first week on the job is any indication, she's more than ready to handle the heat. But the question remains, will her bold moves pay off in the long run, or will they backfire as the media landscape continues to evolve? And perhaps more importantly, how will her actions shape the future of political communication in the age of social media? Let us know what you think in the comments, and as always, stay tuned for more updates from the ever-dramatic world of American politics.